Hey everybody, and welcome to another tutorial brought to you by the Minecrafters. I am Captain Jack, and today we're going to be covering the steam oven and steam boilers. Alright, steam boilers. We have a lot to cover in this episode, and I want to apologize for the length because I want to be as thorough as possible. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to steam boilers, and you're going to learn it all in this tutorial. High pressure, low pressure, liquid fueled, and solid fueled boiler boxes. These are the things that we are going to be dealing with in this tutorial. The liquid fueled and the solid fueled boiler boxes are going to be the bottom layer of your boiler, while the low or high pressure boiler tanks are going to be placed above. Let's just go ahead and take a look at how to make these. The solid fueled boiler firebox is going to be made by a furnace in the bottom here, some brick, and a fire charge. Fire charges can be made by combining blaze powder, gunpowder, and coal or charcoal in a shapeless crafting grid. It's going to give you 3 of these things. A liquid fueled is made by a furnace, 4 steel, iron bars, and another fire charge. And again, you're going to get 3 of these per craft, and it's going to take, depending on how many you want or how big your boiler is going to be, you could take up to 9 of these to build. The high and low pressure boiler tanks basically are the same thing as the tanks that we talked about in the last episode. They're going to be made out of iron plates, which are made by the rolling machine, which we learned about in episode 2. And the high pressure is going to be made by combining 2 steel plates to give you 1 high pressure boiler tank. Let's very quickly go over the GUI of both of these things because they are similar but different. The solid fueled boiler here is basically we have on the far left here we have a spot for steam, and this says 0 of 16,000. And once the temperature reaches 100 degrees, we're going to be you're going to start building up steam, and that's going to raise higher and higher and higher. It's going to get to the midway point, and as the temperature raises, it's going to go farther up from there. So this is where it holds steam. This is the temperature of your boiler. Now the temperature and how fast it rises, or the max temperature and how fast it rises, is going to be directly in correlation with how large your boiler is. So if you have a max size boiler, it's going to be able to get up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, and it's going to take a lot longer to get there. You're going to see that in a minute. The temperature is raising extremely quickly. We're just using coal. It's not burning very quickly. And we'll talk about that later. This little icon here tells you how fast it's consuming one of these things here. So when the fire gets to the bottom, it's going to consume another coal. And there you go. And it's going to continue to increase in temperature. Over here is just another spot for additional fuels. And you can see that I put some in here, but they immediately just go to this slot here. This is just kind of a buffer storage inside the steam boiler, or the solid steam firebox, to accompany this main spot here. Here we have water, and the steam boilers are going to absolutely need water, otherwise they are going to explode. And because of that, I'm going to take this fuel out. You can supply water in a bunch of different ways, and we'll go over that in a second. And last but not least, you are going to be able to dump water directly into the steam boiler by placing a water bucket, cell, water can, something like that into here, and you can fill that up with water there. The liquid fueled firebox is similar again, but different. You have a spot for steam. You have the internal temperature of the boiler, 20 degrees Celsius. You have the little fire symbol here, which will indicate how fast it's burning through the type of fuel that you have in here. Here, in place of where the coal would go in a solid fuel firebox, you have where the fuel would go, and I can go ahead and drop a fuel in there, and you can see that it kind of went inside of there. Biofuel, it's filling up. This is where you put your fuel. This is where you put your water, and it works just like this. And there we see the temperature is slowly rising. Okay, so that's not going to get too hot. This is going to start cooling down. No, it's not going to start cooling down. It's just going to get hotter and hotter. So I'm going to erase these things here so they don't explode. Okay, so that's the GUIs. That's kind of what they mean inside, and we'll get into more detail as we go. Boilers combine water and heat to produce steam. Heat is generated from various liquids and solids that burn at different rates. Some fuel is used fast, while others can burn for a long time. Efficiency of the fuel will determine how much is used in the initial heating stage, as well as the maximum temperature phase. We'll get into that, don't worry. You want to make sure that your boilers have a constant flow of water to them, otherwise you'll risk overheating, which will cause an explosion. And I have a couple overheating fireboxes over there, none of which have exploded yet. Maybe they'll do it in this episode. Likewise, you want to make sure that your fuel source is being constantly fed into your boiler. Initially, it will require a lot of fuel to reach the maximum temperature, but as the temperature climbs, the fuel needed to sustain the temperature decreases. Um, that's very important, and I'll say it probably 3 more times. Epic things are this way. These signs are advanced information panels. Over here, a few things to remember as we go here, and again, I'll probably repeat them because they are important. On the sign on the left, we have boilers where use 8 times as much fuel when heating up than when it is at max heat. In most cases, you want to keep your boiler running 24/7 or all the time so as to not waste fuel. You do not want to keep reheating these things because you're going to consume in copious amounts of fuel trying to keep them warm. Another thing to remember is each block of low pressure boiler tank will produce 10 mJ per tick, while each block of high pressure tank will produce 20 mJ per tick. It'll take much longer for a high pressure boiler to heat up because their internal max heat is twice as much. So just like the steel and iron tanks that we talked about in the last episode, steel is kind of double whatever iron is. So let's take a look at cooling your boiler. Here I have this is the max size base boiler, and I have a solid fuel boiler firebox. It's such a mouthful. And basically what I have done down here is I placed an aqueous accumulator alongside 2 little pools of water, and that's an infinite pool, and it's going to keep this thing supplied with water. One aqueous accumulator, I believe, can effectively cool 4 max size boilers, whether liquid or solid, doesn't matter. And this would just go down 1 layer. It would sit right on top of your aqueous accumulator, and the machine would pump water directly into your boiler there. Here, let's take a look at the various boiler sizes. Let me sneak over here. We're going to look at that sign to the left. The smallest boiler is the one on the left, and we built those in the beginning. It's a 1x1. It's the base is just 1 solid or liquid fueled firebox, and the top is either a high pressure or a low pressure. Drew a blank there. High pressure or low pressure box, and it's just one of them, one boiler. The next biggest size is a 2x2, and you can see that in the middle there of my screen. And the maximum height is 3, indicated by the stack on the right, and the minimum height is 2, indicated by the stack on the left. Finally, we have the 3x3, and that's 9 liquid or solid fireboxes on the bottom, and that can be a maximum height of 4, or you can make it only 2 high. And again, the size of your boiler is going to directly affect how much steam, water, and how hot it can get. And we will see that, okay? Before we get into how much energy these produce, because that's probably what you really want to know, let's go ahead and take a look at a few more things before we go any farther. So I'm going to set up a liquid fueled firebox. So I have my aqueous accumulator here. I'm going to build it right on top. Okay, I'm going to make it the maximum size, and I'm going to go ahead and use high pressure. Okay, I'm going to put a base. And you can see how there's a little bit of a gap in between these, and that's because this is not a valid structure. So it's not going to make anything. If I try to right click on it, it will not open any GUI because it doesn't exist. There we go. Once I have a valid structure, it's going to stick all together, and I can look inside of here and see that I can hold 576,000 steam as opposed to the very small amount that we saw in the minimum size one. Its default is 20 degrees Celsius. It's going to be able to hold a bunch of liquid here. You can see my water is slowly filling up because of that accumulator underneath there. Okay, and I can hold 72,000 water and 16,000 liquid. Let's make this thing a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm going to go down. The structure is going to break. I'm going to make it the maximum size. There you go, very big. Okay, it did retain its water, and that's very useful to know. It will also retain its liquid. It will lose its heat though. If you want to expand your boilers, make sure you're very conscious of how hot it is, and if you are willing to lose all that time, because it can take upwards of it might be 5, it might be 8 hours to fully heat one of these things up at max size. So it does take a long time, and it does take a lot of resources to get there. So you don't want to just lose that heat without realizing. So be really careful when you're working around your boilers. We can see that the maximum steam that any of these things can hold is 1.152 million. Temperature again remains the same. The the amount of fuel inside stays the same, but the amount of water increases to a maximum of 144,000 water, and it's really unnecessary. But there you have it. Okay. So once we have our steam boiler together, this is a liquid one again. I can shift right click. I can put those biofuel cans inside of there. It's going to fill up this GUI, and it's going to start very, very, very slowly heating up this steam boiler. Now you can see the difference between this big block and the little one that we saw before, how much faster the little one was heating up. So again, this one's going to take anywhere from 5 to 8, maybe somebody can throw in the comments, hours to fully heat up. And as it's heating up, you can see that it says in yellow there, current burning time, 230 ticks. As the boiler gets more and more heat inside of it, whether it's liquid or solid, it doesn't matter. The burning time for each unit, which a unit of liquid is a bucket, a unit of solid fuel is like 1 coal, it's going to take longer and longer and longer to burn up 1 unit. So we have coal inside of here, or we have a biofuel, and it's taking 230 ticks to burn through this. But when I get the temperature of one of these steam boilers up extremely hot, let's take a look at this for example. We're almost at the maximum heat, and if I go ahead and put a fuel bucket in there, or a fuel can in here, it's going to say 5,966 ticks. So it's going to take a lot more time to go through one of these capsules because it's at max heat, or it's almost at max heat. Okay, and we can see here that we have steam inside of here, and we'll talk about what that does in just a minute. Now, what kind of fuels can you burn inside of your liquid or solid boilers? Well, there are a bunch. Let's first look at this. Once again, very quickly, fuels will be consumed very quickly at first, but as the temperature rises, the rate at which the fuel is consumed will decrease. We just talked about that. You can see this by mousing over the fuel while inside the boiler's GUI, okay? That's just something useful to take a look at. Liquid fuels can be piped directly into boilers with waterproof pipes by Buildcraft, or directly adjacent tesseracts or ender tanks. One of my setups uses ender tanks. We'll take a look at that, but you can just slap a tesseract or ender tank right next to your boiler, and as long as it's configured properly to receive, or the ender tank to output liquid, it will just load right up into your boiler. No big deal. Solid fuel can be piped in with transport pipes and applied energistics export buses. Buildcraft pipes, however, are not recommended, and we'll see very quickly a really quick automation of this machine. It's really simple. All it needs is one export bus. A few different types of liquids that you can burn: creosote, ethanol, biofuel, fuel. Some of these are from GregTech: fluid nitro fuel, hydrogen, gas methane, lithium, and it will tell you exactly how much heat that each of them will burn at. At the very top, you can see it says 4.8 heat, liquid fuel firebox, and respectively, these other ones will say different things. So 32,000 heat for ethanol, same thing with biofuel, and fuel being the most efficient at 96,000 heat inside a liquid fueled firebox. So this is by far the most efficient liquid that you could possibly use. Note that you can't use lava. Alrighty then. Let's take a look at some of the rates that it burns things at. We're going to go ahead and, oops, that's probably emptied. No, it's not. Actually, this is slowly heating up, and we're at 43 ticks for charcoal, and it's burning at a fairly quick pace. Every time this drops to the bottom, it's going to consume one, and you can see that it goes down, and it's using this buffer over here. It's getting lower and lower and lower. But let's say I wanted to export some wood into this thing instead of the coal that we're using. And I'm going to empty this out. It's going to load this up with wood. And you'll note that the wood is only 9 ticks. And it's going to start flying through wood at an extremely absorbent pace. You really do not want to heat up your boilers with wood unless you have so much that you have no idea what to do with it. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands. It's going to take thousands of charcoal or coal as it is to heat up one of these things if they're max size to begin with. So you really want to be careful with what type of resources that you put in there. And speaking of solid resources, I did forget these solid resources. You can burn saplings, and they only generate 250. Oak wood planks 750, wood 750. I think wood burns for a little bit longer. And you have coal and charcoal at 4K each. And coal, like we talked about in episode 1, 16K, that's going to take 4 times longer to go through than coal or charcoal. So it makes it a fairly good fuel to get your boilers up on their feet and up and running if you have a lot of it. You can also throw blaze rod and basically just about anything that you can throw into a furnace, you can throw into one of these things to help it to heat up. Okay? All right. Next, we're going to talk about power. And this at times is hard to demonstrate, so I'm going to do my best. There's a lot of quirky little things that you're going to run into when you start making your boilers, and I'm going to do my best to explain them. While we're here, you can see I have the under tank right next to here, set to output because orange is on top, and that's keeping me full of water here. We have coal, and that's burning at 16,000 ticks. And that's burning at such a high rate because it's such a small boiler. It's going to take a long time to use one of these. So it's a small, low pressure, as you can see there. Maximum temperature 500. We're there. The steam is maintaining right there. We'll talk about that in a second. And so this is taking a long time to use this stuff. It's going to be using this until I'm dead, basically. If we go over here and check out the low pressure liquid fueled firebox, check this out. 243,000 ticks this thing is burning at. It's going to take forever to use one of these capsules, but you're not getting very much power out of this boiler. So there is a trade-off. Again, maximum temperature 500 at the smallest amount. All right, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. I have listed here that low pressure and or liquid and solid are sending out 10 and 24 EU per tick. That's not necessarily true, but if you go ahead and look at this steam consumer, it's telling us that it's making 10 mj per tick, but you can see that it's flickering in and out. It's really not making 10 mj per tick, it's really only making 2 mj per tick, but this doesn't really know that. It just shuts off. Same thing with this one over here. It's making 24 EU per tick, that's the equivalent, but again, it's really only making 2. And you'll kind of be able to see that in a minute, and I'll tell you why in a second. Here we have a high pressure boiler tank in contrast. You can see the high pressure versus the low pressure over here. Somebody kind of asked for this in the last video in the comments. We have this one at 19%, which is about 20. This one's at 45%. So you can see how much more steam that this is actually producing. And you can kind of see that happening by the rate that this is ticking. So this is ticking kind of once a second, maybe a little bit faster. And this one's ticking much faster. And that is because, and you're going to have to remember this because it is important, that's because of the limitations of liquid ducts. And since liquid ducts are so boss, they're actually pulling more steam out of these boilers than they can make on their own. The steam will never sink below this line, and that's why it's not raising any higher. And that's it's showing this weird power because it's pulling too much steam out, and it has to give itself a rest because the boilers can't tick fast enough, which is why this number here is skewed. So 2 mj per tick, 4 mj per tick, that's what you need to know with these. Okay, let's take a look at a slightly larger, and we're going to use liquid for all these just because it was easier for me to set up. You're going to notice that the low pressure is at 16%, and this one's at 26%. It's usually actually right exactly double. Maybe that's just because I'm too slow at clicking these. This one will raise it double the speed. And you can basically see that in the numbers there. But if we look inside of here, the maximum heat is still 500 degrees, even at this size. The steam is all the way full to the top, and I will show you why. Promise I won't keep you waiting on that. This one is producing, let's take a look at it here, 16 mj per tick, and you can see that this is holding even, and that's because of the way I have the liquid ducts configured. This one's holding at a steady 32. So this high pressure is putting out twice as much as the low pressure. Now let me go ahead and grab some liquid ducts and explain this the best I can. I'll try, I promise. Because of the amount of liquid that these things can carry, I'm not going to get into the amounts. This is supplying just enough and not over that the amount that the steam boiler can make. That may not have made sense, but you're going to have to deal with it. Okay. If I add another liquid duct here and connect them, what's going to start happening is, first of all, you're going to notice that this is, well, that's not going to jump up anymore, maybe. Oh, let me look. 80, 27, 26, 27, 26. Let me add one more. This is about my third time doing this tutorial. Okay, add one more. I'm gonna try to drain the steam out of this oven way too fast. There we go. It's starting to drain too quickly. So you see how now they're equal, 32 and 32? That's only because I have too much steam being pulled out of the steam boiler. And this is going to drop down to this line. It's not going to go below the line, but when it gets there, it's going to start flickering in and out, and it's not going to produce any more than 16 MJ per tick. It's going to have short little bursts of a little bit more MJ per tick, but don't be fooled. Don't say, aha, Captain, I got my low pressure to do the same thing as my high pressure. It's really not. Just wait until it gets down here, and you're going to see that this is just going to start choking, and you are going to run right back down. There we go. See? So you drop all the way now to nothing and drop all the way back up to 26 at max, okay? So that's what happens if you send too much steam out of your boiler. You just want to kind of keep it solid like this. Same thing goes for this here. Okay, if I attach, let me see if I pull too much out. It's acting a little bit finicky, okay, but it'll do the same thing. I'll get a huge bounce in power because I'm ripping too much steam out of the engine and putting it into the consumer, and don't want to do that. And it will only retain that amount of energy for just a short time. Let's take a look at these really quickly. We have a high pressure versus a low pressure, and these are maximum size. The full size will put out 72 MJ per tick, which is 173 or thereabouts EU per tick. The max size high pressure boiler will put out 144 MJ per tick or 340 EU per tick. Yes, you can crank them up to about 600 EU per tick, but they don't last. Okay. If you want to find out how much your boiler will produce, just multiply the amount of low pressure tanks by 2, and that's the MJ that it'll put out, and multiply that number by 2.4, and that will give you the rough amount of EU per tick that it'll put out. And for the high pressure boiler, multiply the amount of boiler blocks you have by 4, and that will give you how much MJ per tick that it puts out. Multiply that number by 2.4, that'll give you the amount of EU per tick that puts out. So hopefully that explains what all the different sizes will put out, and if I haven't done a good job of it, check out my signs. They will explain it. I'm going to remove this here. Drop that internal buffer a little bit there. This thing will be, we're almost up to 100 million power on this one, okay? You can see I'm putting out 340 EU per tick, and I'm using the power converters mod just to kind of demonstrate this. It's putting out about 700 steam, and we're at max. That's retaining its steam inside of here. We're at 1,000 degrees, and this is burning at an extremely slow rate, which we've already seen, 6,061. It's going to consume every tick, and it's totally maintaining. So this is up, it's running. It's going to take a long time for it to burn through one fuel. You can see this barely hasn't moved. Once you get these things hot, you're not really going to have to worry about them. It's just the babysitting that's going to take to get it up and running, especially when you're looking at the solid fueled boiler boxes. Now let me just demonstrate really quickly what you can do with these, again, so you don't yell at me and tell me that I'm insane because you got way more out of yours than I got out of mine. Okay, I'm going to connect all these. I'm going to put extra boilers onto my steam consumers. I'm going to take too much liquid out of this thing, and I'm going to jump this thing up to 350. I believe I can even make it go higher, but I'm not going to waste too much time on it right now. It's going to start draining this extremely slowly. You can see there's a little bit of a gap there, and it's not quite keeping up. It's going to drop down here, and your power is going to flicker. So you're best off by just connecting just the right amount of liquid ducts, and I believe I have 7 liquid ducts, and that's 100 per tick, so that's 700 right here. 5, 6, 7, 700 millibuckets of steam per tick is going to give you 340. Okay. And you don't need any more than 9 liquid ducts plugged onto the back of these, lest I failed to mention that. That will get out the maximum amount of steam out of the maximum size boiler. Other boilers will require less, as you can see here. Um, Best just to experiment with them. Sometimes I just load the whole back of it with liquid ducts. It doesn't really matter. Just be careful how much you're outputting into your engines, which we'll talk about in the next episode, or your power converters mod, which you can see here. And I'm going to go ahead and check this out here. This is at 60 MJ per tick, okay? And that's just because it's a low pressure. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to put a BC producer. And I'm going to grab a conduit right here. I'm going to lose about 100 million power there. I'm going to put a BC producer, put a line here to fill up this redstone energy cell. And 100 MJ per tick. Why is it doing that? Because it could only take a maximum of 100 MJ. Let's put that there. Okay, it jumped up to 300 MJ. It's only going to last until the buffer lasts. It should drop down to 144. Did 140 close enough. Okay, so that's the same thing in MJ. Okay, and we already talked about a total of 9 liquid ducts will be enough to extract all of the needed steam from the boiler. Okay, and that's what we talked about in the bottom there earlier. Depending on the amount of liquid ducts that you attach, or you can use a Railcraft waterproof pipe, will cause this to fluctuate a little bit. And we'll go into steam engines again in the next episode. Once we have our steam from these things, okay? Now, the very last thing that I want to talk about is the steam oven. And the steam oven is made by, didn't come prepared to class, steam oven. Okay, we have just a bunch of steel plates surrounded by a furnace. It's going to give you 4 of these, and you're going to need 2 recipes to fully complete the steam oven because it's a 2x2, which it says right there in the description, and it's a multi-block. And what the steam engine does is it smelts up to 9 items at once every 12.8 seconds, so roughly thereabouts, and it needs 32 MB or 8,000 millibuckets inside the machine. That's what it looks like anyway. 32 MB of steam to run continuously, and it will auto output fuel to adjacent solid fuel fireboxes, which is really neat. And that's why I have this tree farm set up, just so I can kind of demonstrate this a little bit. Inside here we have the steam oven. I have steam being pumped into it already, so it's already loaded up. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some oak wood. I'm going to put this inside of here. And this is going to drop down here, and it's going to take 9 of these oak wood. And once this reaches the top, it's going to smelt the 9, and it's going to bring them right over to this side. And if it was adjacent to a solid fuel boiler, it would bring whatever it could of this out into the firebox. And there's that 8,000 steam that I was talking about earlier. This will take a variety of woods. I'm going to put some magic wood in here. It'll burn that too. Don't worry about it. Rubber wood, whatever you got. It will make magic happen. And what you do is you put it just like this, adjacent to here. I have these steam boilers, which aren't quite at max heat yet. I'm going to just look up inside of here. You see I have them automated a little bit. I'm going to take the coal coke out. This is full of wood. I have the whole grid loaded. I have a bunch of charcoal over here. I'm going to go ahead and take this out, and you can see that it's automatically outputting the charcoal. See, it's emptying these out here. It's automatically putting charcoal in here. The steam oven won't actually fill the buffer chest inside of here, but every time it smelts, it's going to load some of the charcoal in here. And eventually, this is all you need to sustain these solid fueled boiler boxes once they get up and running. This won't sustain it at the beginning, but it will sustain it towards the end. And it's a really clever way to do it too. So that is the steam oven. It's basically its primary use. You can use this to smelt other things if you want, or to mess around with charcoal and whatnot. But once these are at max temperature, which they almost are, this is burning every 34 ticks. I'm not sure that it can quite keep up with both of these at once, but it will be able to keep up with 2 full-size steam boilers with just wood. And you can make an MFR tree farm. That's what this thing is here. Got a harvester, got a fertilizer, planter underneath. This is just showing me that I'm getting a bunch of wood every time, and the wood's being spat out into these boilers. Now I think that's pretty much everything. I really hope I covered everything. We covered power, kind of what each of these makes and how they compare to each other, low versus high pressure, solid versus liquid. There's really no difference. It's just whatever fuel that you have available to yourself. You can automate them with applied energistics. And we're getting hotter and hotter here. Oh, no, we're not. We're losing heat. No explosions out here yet. That's okay. Maybe I'll post a screenshot on the website. We talked about liquiducts. We talked about um, aqueous accumulators. We talked about the base, the sizes. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments or post them on Facebook, and we'll be happy to answer them there. I will address anything that I missed in previous episodes on the next episode, which we're going to talk about the hobbyist steam engine, the commercial steam engine, the industrial steam engine, and basically how to harness this steam that we're getting here and turning it into power in a way that's not quite as cheap as the power converters mod can do it. I think that's about it. I think that wraps it up. Make sure you check us out on all of our social media outlets. We are theminecrafters.com, and we would be happy to hear from you, whether it's in the comments on our website, on Facebook, on Twitch TV, where we live stream most Thursdays and do all sorts of various other things. So that's it from me. And as always, guys, stay poised.